Welcome to True Crime Tuesday. I am so excited not to be talking about John Wayne Gacy. You have no idea. Literally none. My hair looks a fool. Yesterday was wash day, but I could not bring myself to get my life together. So anyway, we're talking about Alphonse Gabriel Capone, or Capone, honey. January 17th, 1899 was the day he was born, and January 25th, 1947 was the day he died, before my grandmother was even born. Sometimes known by the nickname Scarface, was an American gang. I don't know, did he have scars on his face? Because I'm looking right at him and I see no scars, but whatever. He was an American gangster and businessman who attained notoriety during the Prohibition era as the co-founder and boss of the Chicago outfit. And we not talking about clothes. His 7-year reign as a crime boss ended when he went to prison at the age of 33. So my sister could not. She ran the crime thing for 7 years and went to jail. Terrible. Capone was born in New York City in 1899 to Italian immigrant parents. He joined the 5 Points gang as a teenager and became a bouncer in organized crime premises, such as brothels. Child, scandalous. In his early 20s, he moved to Chicago and became a bodyguard. It all comes back to Chicago, doesn't it? It does. And became a bodyguard and trusted factotum for Johnny Torrio. Child. My God, today. Not Johnny Torrio became an advisor to Lucky Luciano. We love Lucky Luke. Not we love. Whatever. Shut up, Kayla. Johnny Torrio, head of criminal syndicate that illegally supplied alcohol, the forerunner of the outfit, and was politically protected throughout the Union Siciliana, the Italians, child. The Siciliana. A conflict with the North Side gang was instrumental in Capone's rise and fall. Torrio went into retirement after North Side gunmen almost killed him, handing control to Capone. Capone expanded the bootlegging business through increasingly violent means, but his mutually profitable relationships with Mayor William Hale Thompson and the city's police meant he seemed safe from law enforcement, but not really, because he had done went to jail at 33. I already told you that. Capone apparently reveled in attention, such as the cheers from spectators when he appeared at ball games. He made donations to various charities and was viewed by many as a modern-day Robin Hood. However, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, in which 7 rival gang members were murdered in the middle of the day, child, damaged the public image of Chicago and Capone, leading to influential citizens to demand government action and newspapers to dub Capone public enemy number 1. The first public enemy out of all of them. The federal authorities became intent on jailing Capone and charged him with 22 counts of tax evasion. That's how they get you, child. He was convicted of 5 counts in 1931 during a highly publicized case. The judge admitted as evidence Capone's admissions of his income and unpaid taxes made during prior and ultimately abortive negotiations to pay the government taxes he owed. He was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. After conviction, he replaced his defense team with experts in tax law, and his grounds for appeal were strengthened by a Supreme Court ruling, but his appeal ultimately failed. Capone showed signs of neurosyphilis, child. The syphilis had done got to his brain early in his sentence and became increasingly debilitated before being released after almost 8 years of incarceration. On January 25th, 1947, he died of cardiac arrest after suffering a stroke. Terrible. So let's talk about his early life. We're not going to read this whole article because I did that with John Wayne Gacy and I was dreamed, honey. Dreamed. Capone was born in Brooklyn, New York. I already told you that, on January 17th, 1899. His parents were Italian immigrants. I already told you that too. Gabrielle Capone, who was born 1865 to 1920, and Teresa Capone, who her maiden name was Rayola. And she was born in 1967 and died in 1952, so she had done lived a good long life. I think she definitely lived longer than her son. Terrible. His father was a barber and his mother was a seamstress. So his hair and outfits had to always be together. Both born in Angry, a small commune, outside of Naples, in the province of Salerno, probably Salerno. Capone's family had immigrated to the United States in 1893 by ship, first going through the Fiume, modern-day Rijeka, Croatia, a port city in what was then Austria-Hungary. Does Austria-Hungary don't exist? They two separate things now? Whatever. This is not geography. The family settled at 95 Navy Street in the Navy Yard section of Brooklyn. In New York City, Gabrielle, the father, Capone, worked at a nearby barbershop at 29 Park Avenue. When Al was 11, he and his family moved to 38 Garfield Place in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I don't know why you need to know that, but it's in the article. The parents had 8 other children. Vincenzo, I think it is, Capone, who later changed his name to Richard Hart and became a prohibition agent in Homer, Nebraska. Raphael James Capone, known as Ralph Bottles Capone, who took charge of his brother's beverage industry. Salvatore Frank Capone, Ermina Capone, who died at the age of 1, God bless her. Ermino Capone. Albert Capone, Matthew Capone, Mafalda, Capone. I think that's all of them, Lord. Ralph and Frank worked with Al Capone in his criminal empire. Frank did so until his death on April 1st, 1924, which seems like it was very early in life. It seems like, I don't know what year he was born, but it seemed like he did not live long. Ralph ran the bottling companies, both legal and illegal, early on, and was also the front man for the Chicago outfit, and we ain't talking about clothes, girl, for some time, until he was imprisoned for tax evasion in 1932. I'm telling you, tax evasion. That's how they eat up the gangsters, honey. Capone showed promise as a student, but had trouble with the rules, obviously, at his strict parochial. I think it's parochial. Catholic school. Parochial? I think it's probably parochial. His schooling ended at the age of 14 after he was expelled for hitting a female teacher in the face, so he had no respect of boundary. He worked at odd jobs around Brooklyn, including a candy store and a bowling alley. From 1916 to 1918, he played semi-professional baseball. So he thought he was finna be, I was really finna call up a name. I don't know nobody. I don't know those sports players, honey. What's that man that was married to Marilyn Monroe? Now I gotta Google it, child. What's his name? Marilyn Monroe. Baseball. Joe DiMaggio. I had meant to call his name, but I don't know his name because I don't know those sports girls. I know that's the man that struck my dear Marilyn in the body. We're not talking about Marilyn anyway. Following this, Capone was influenced by gangster Johnny Torrio, whom he came to regard as a mentor. So Johnny Torrio was just that girl because he was mentoring Al Capone and Lucky Luciano. So he was just out here. Capone married May Josephine Collin at the age of 19 on December 30th, 1918. She was Irish Catholic. You know, the Irish and the and the Italian love to marry. And earlier that month had given birth to their son Albert Francis Sonny Capone, who was living with on Earth from 1918 to 2004. Albert lost most of his hearing in his left ear as a child. Capone was under the age of 21, and his parents had to consent in writing to the marriage. You had to be 21 to get married back in the 1918s, child. By all accounts, the two had a happy marriage despite his criminal lifestyle. Career. In New York, child, he was in the 5 Points gang. He did some racketeering with Frankie Yale, whoever that may be. Frankie was a bartender in Coney Island, in a dance hall saloon called the Harvard Inn. And Capone had done insulted a woman while working the door, and he was slashed with a knife 3 times on the left side of his face by her brother Frank Galluccio. So I guess that's why he got the name Scarface. I don't see the scar. Maybe he just always took pictures on the right side like Mariah Carey. Capone did not like being called Scarface. Let me see. You got to be the baddest son of a to have sliced Al Capone in the face. Like, I know he took that story with him everywhere he went. Hey girls, it's me. I'm Frank, and I slashed Al Capone in the face. At some point, when Capone was photographed, he hid the scarred left side of his face. I see, saying that the injuries were war wounds. He was called Snorky by his closest friends, a term for a sharp dresser, because you know his mama made all his clothes. He had done moved to Chicago, child, at the invitation of Johnny Torrio, who was imported by crime boss James Big Jim Calissimo, who apparently was that girl, as an enforcer. Capone began in Chicago as a bouncer in a brothel, where he contracted syphilis, child, cheating on his wife. Timely use of salvarsan probably could have cured the infection, but he apparently never sought treatment, and that's how his brain got ate up. In 1923, he purchased a small house. It's telling you the address, but I don't care. In the Park Manor neighborhood in the city's south side for US $5,500, which it does not translate here to what it would be today, but I'm sure it's a lot of money, child, because it was 1923. According to the Chicago Daily Tribune, hijacker Joe Howard was killed on May 7th, 1923, after he tried to interfere with the Capone-Torrio bootleg beer business. In the early years of the decade, his name began appearing in newspaper sports pages where he was described as a boxing promoter. Torrio took over Calissimo's crime empire after the latter's murder on May 11, 1920. Lord, they done killed Calissimo, in which Capone was suspected of being involved. Torrio headed an essentially Italian organized crime group that was the biggest in the city, with Capone as his right-hand man, because not that left side, we would see the scars. He was wary of being drawn into gang wars and tried to negotiate agreements over territory between rival crime groups. The smaller North Side gang, led by Dean O'Banion, came under pressure from the Jenner brothers, who were allied with Torrio. O'Banion found that Torrio was unhelpful with the encroachment of the Jenners into the North Side, despite his pretensions to be a settler of disputes. In a fateful setup, Torrio arranged the murder of O'Banion at his flower shop, child, on November 10, 1924. This placed Jaime Weiss, they love an old Jaime, at the head of the gang, backed by Vincent Drusi and Bugs Moran. They love a Bugs as well. Weiss had been a close friend of O'Banion, and the Northsiders made it priority to get revenge on his killers. Al Capone was a frequent visit to Rye Mabie in Montego, Tennessee, where he was traveling between Chicago and Florida, and his Florida estate in Miami, because he was just rolling in the money. Let me see. Let's move forward. In January 1925, Capone was ambushed, leaving him shaken but unhurt. 12 days later, Torrio was returning from a shopping trip, where he was shot several times. After recovering, he effectively resigned and handed control to Capone, age 26, because he was like, you could get killed, honey, but not me, who became the new boss of an organization that took in illegal breweries and a transportation network that reached to Canada with political and law enforcement protection. In turn, he was able to use more violence to increase revenue. An establishment that refused to purchase liquor from him often got blown up, and as many as 100 people were killed in such bombings during the 1920s. Rivals saw Capone as responsible for the proliferation of brothels in the city. Capone often established the help of local members of the black community into his operations. Jazz musicians Milt Hinton and Lionel Hampton. Oh, this picture of Lionel. Lionel, not this picture, honey. Had uncles who worked for Capone on the south side of Chicago. A fan of jazz as well, because you know the Italians love them some jazz, child. Capone once asked clarinetist, whatever, Johnny Dodds, to play a number that Dodds did not know. Capone split a $100 bill in half and told Dodds that he would get the other half when he earned it. Capone also sent 2 bodyguards to accompany jazz pianist Earl Hines on a road trip, which I think is nice, I suppose. I guess. Capone indulged in custom suits, cigars, gourmet food and drink, and female companionship, which is how he got that syphilis that ate up his brainchild and he died at 48. He was particularly known for his flamboyant and costly jewelry. His favorite responses to questions about his activities were, I am just a businessman giving the people what they want, and all I do is satisfy a public demand. Capone had become a national celebrity and talking point. He based himself in Cicero, Illinois, after using bribery and widespread intimidation to take over town council elections, such as the 1924 Cicero municipal elections, child. And this made it difficult for the Northsiders to target him. His driver was found tortured and murdered. And that shocked me. And there was an attempt on Weiss's life in the Chicago Loop. On September 20th, 1926, my great-grandmother was not yet born. The North Side Gang used a ploy outside the Capone's headquarters at the Hawthorne Inn aimed at drawing him to the windows. Gunmen in several cars then opened fire with Thompson submachine guns. You know they call them Tommy guns. And shotguns at the windows of the first floor restaurant. Capone was unhurt and called for a truce, but the negotiations fell through. 3 weeks later, on October 11th, Weiss was killed outside the former O'Banion flower shop, child, North Side headquarters. The owner of Hawthorne's restaurant was a friend of Capone's, and he was kidnapped and killed by Moran and Drucy in January 1927. Reports of Capone's intimidation became well known to the point where it was alleged that some companies, such as the makers of Vine Glow, which is a grape concentrate brick product sold in the United States during Prohibition, I guess it was like fake grape juice. Anyway, such as the makers of Vine Glow, would use supposed Capone threats as a marketing tactic. My goodness. Capone became increasingly security-minded, as he should, and desirous of getting away from Chicago, as he should. As a precaution, he and his entourage would often show up suddenly at one of Chicago's train depots and buy up an entire Pullman sleeper car on a night train to Cleveland, Omaha, Kansas City, Little Rock, or High Springs, child, down in Arkansas, where they would spend a week in a luxury hotel suites under assumed names. In 1928, Capone paid $40,000, child, to Clarence Bush of the Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company for a 10,000 square foot home at 93 Palm Avenue on Palm Island, Florida, in Biscayne Bay between Miami and Miami Beach. We was just over there the other month. I need to look up how much $40,000 in 1928 was. $40,000 in 1928. $40,000 is the equivalent of $610,170.76. Wow. Okay. My boy was rolling in the dough. At some point, child, he had done got in a feud in November 1925 with Joe Aiello, AIELLO, Aiello. Anyway, they had a feud, child. I'm not finna read all this, but somebody probably died. In November 1927, Aiello's organized machine gun ambushes across from Lombardo's home and a cigar store frequented by Capone. But those plans were foiled after an anonymous tip led to police raid in several addresses and arrest Milwaukee gunman Angelo La Mantio. Child, the girls had done got arrested, and Aiello got murdered. Long story short. Political alliances. My sister was aligned with policies. I'm not going to read all this. But the police and the government liked him, and they liked to drink. so they just let him do whatever. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone was widely assumed to have been responsible for ordering the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Despite being at his Florida home at the time of the massacre, like he couldn't just send a letter and say, hey y'all, go down there and kill them folk. The massacre was an attempt to eliminate Bugs Moran, the head of the North Side gang, and the motivation for the plan may have been the fact that some expensive whiskey illegally imported from Canada via the Detroit River had been hijacked while it was being transported to Cook County, Illinois. Moran was the last survivor of the North Side gunmen. His succession had come about because his similarly aggressive predecessors, Weiss and Vincent Drusi, had been killed in the violence that followed the murder of the original leader, Dean O'Banion. I already told y'all about that. Long story short, child, he had done shot up these people on Thursday, February 14, 1929. Capone's lookout signaled 4 gunmen disguised as police officers to initiate a fake police raid, and they lined up 7 victims and shot them, honey, to pieces. Pieces. And so everybody in the city was like, we can't do Capone no more. And so Capone donated to charities and sponsored a soup kitchen during the Depression to try to make up for everybody being like, Capone, we don't know about you, girl. Long story. He had done got arrested. He went to trial in March 27, 1929. He was arrested. On May 16, 1929, he was arrested again. May 17, 1929, he was indicted by a grand jury, and a trial was held before Philadelphia Municipal Court. They used to, honey, they would arrest you back in the day, and trial was tomorrow, literally. The trial was held before Philadelphia Municipal Court Judge John E. Walsh. Following the entering of a guilty plea by his attorney, Capone was sentenced to a prison term of 1 year. And he's smiling a little bit in his mugshot. So he like, yeah, it ain't no thing. On August 8th, 1929, Capone was transferred to Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary. A week after his release in March 1930, Capone was listed as the #1 public enemy on the unofficial Chicago Crime Commission's widely publicized list. Not #2, child, #1. He was arrested in April 1930 on vagrancy charges when visiting Miami Beach, which, why would you? I don't understand vagrancy charges, but whatever. Because, like, you homeless and then you get whatever. The governor had ordered sheriffs to run him out of the state. Capone claimed that the Miami police had refused him food and water and threatened to arrest his family, which I believe. He was charged with perjury for making these statements, but was acquitted after a 3-day trial in July. In September, a Chicago judge issued a warrant for Capone's arrest on charges of vagrancy and then used the publicity to run against Thompson in the Republican primary. In February 1931, Capone was tried on the contempt of court charge. He was sentenced to 6 months, but he remained free while on appeal of the contempt conviction. He was linked to the murder of Julius Rosenheim, who served as a police informant, so you know he killed him, in the Chicago outfit, and we not talking about clothes, child, for 20 years. That man was an informant for 20 years and thought he was just gonna live. Okay. So anyway, they got our girl on tax evasion and sent him down to the jail, and you know they gave him a extra long time because they really, I mean, the tax evasion was one thing, but they was really arresting him for the other things. So he was in prison, sent to Atlanta U.S. Penitentiary in May 1932. He was 33 years old, but he was already bald-headed at the top, and it was terrible for him. Upon his arrival at Atlanta, Capone was officially diagnosed with syphilis and gonorrhea. Child, terrible. He was also suffering from withdrawal symptoms from cocaine addiction, the use of which had perforated his nasal septum. You know it will. It'll eat up your nose. Capone was competent at his prison job of stitching soles on shoes for 8 hours a day. Because you know his mama was a seamstress. I mean, that ain't got really a lot to do with shoemaking. What's the word for shoe? I don't care. But his letters were barely coherent. He was seen as a weak personality, and so out of his depth dealing with bullying fellow inmates, that his cellmate, seasoned convict Red Rudinsky, feared that Capone would have a breakdown. Rudinsky was a formerly small-time criminal associated with the Capone gang and found himself becoming a protector for Capone. The conspicuous protection of Rudinsky and other prisoners drew accusations from less friendly inmates and fueled suspicion that Capone was receiving special treatment. No solid evidence ever emerged, but it formed part of the rationale for moving Capone to the recently opened Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, which is a crime in and of itself. Because why did y'all take the native land of the Native Americans and put a prison on it? And then got mad when the Native Americans went over to the island and tried to take it back after they closed Alcatraz. I'm just not understanding. Anyway. It's off the coast of San Francisco, and he got transferred in 1934 in August. On June 23rd, 1936, Capone was stabbed and superficially wounded by fellow Alcatraz inmate James C. Lucas. And again, you got to be a bad mother, shut your mouth, to stab Al Capone. Now, the first guy who sliced his face, Capone wasn't Capone yet. He was not yet Capone. But James C. Lucas knew that this was Al Capone and stabbed him anyway. Bad mother, shut your mouth. Due to his good behavior, Capone was permitted to play the banjo in the Alcatraz prison band, the Rock Islanders, which gave regular Sunday concerts for other inmates. Capone also transcribed the song Madonna Mia, creating his own arrangement as a tribute to his wife May, who we forgot about. Capone's decline became increasingly evident as neurosyphilis progressively eroded his mental faculties. His formal diagnosis of syphilis of the brain was made February 1938. He spent the last year of his Alcatraz sentence in the hospital section, confused and disoriented. Capone completed his term in Alcatraz on January 6, 1939, and was transferred to the Federal Correctional Institute at Terminal Island in California to serve out his sentence for contempt of court. He was paroled on November 16, 1939, after his wife May appealed to the court based on his reduced mental capacities. We're going to skip that, y'all. We're going to failing health and death. Due to his failing health, Capone was released from prison November 16, 1939, like I had just told y'all, and referred to the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore for the treatment of paresis, which you know is your brain, it's your brain going nuts, caused by the late stage syphilis. Hopkins refused to admit him on his reputation alone, but Union Memorial Hospital accepted him. Capone was grateful for the compassionate care that he received and donated 2 Japanese weeping cherry trees to Union Memorial Hospital in 1939, which, like, you could have just paid for a wing of the hospital. These cherry trees ain't, this is not enough. We are treating you, and you're a big time criminal, and you're happy for the compassionate care. Pay for it. There are sick people who need things. Anyway, a very sickly Capone left Baltimore on March 20th, 1940. After a few weeks of inpatient and outpatient care from Palm Island, Florida. He left Baltimore for Palm Island, Florida after these weeks of inpatient and outpatient care. In 1942, after a mass production of penicillin, what is wrong with me, was started in the United States, Capone was one of the first American patients treated by the new drug. Though it was too late for him to reverse the damage to his brain, it did slow down the progression of the disease. In 1946, his physician, what is, my mouth just do not do, and a Baltimore psychiatrist examined him and concluded that Capone had the mentality of a 12-year-old child. He spent the last years of his life at his mansion in Palm Island, Florida, spending time with his wife and grandchildren. On January 21st, 1947, Capone had a stroke. He regained consciousness and started to improve, but contracted bronchial pneumonia. He suffered cardiac arrest on January 22nd, and on January 25th, surrounded by his family in his home, Capone died after his heart failed as a result of apoplexy. It's the rupture of an internal organ and the accompanying symptoms. So I guess his heart blew up, child. His body was transported back to Chicago a week later, and a private funeral was held. He was originally buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery, in Chicago. In 1950, Capone's remains, along with those of his father, Gabriel or whatever, and brother Salvatore, were moved to Mount Carmel Cemetery, or Caramel, depending on where you from, in Hillside, Illinois. And he's been in popular culture, child. He's been depicted in a bunch of stuff. That's it. Thank you for visiting us on True Crime Tuesday. I don't know who us is, and I don't know why I continue to say it, but thanks. Like, comment, subscribe, all the things the YouTubers say, and I will catch y'all next week for something else. Peace.